delighted tonight to invite on stage Mr. Tobias Ellwood. He is Minister for the Middle East and Africa for the official opening speech. Minister.
Well, Your Royal Highness, Lords, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much indeed for the opportunity to say a few words. And if I can just begin by saying it's actually the reasons why I wasn't a good officer that I was told that I might make a good politician. I was told I asked too many questions and challenged my seniors. And these aren't the things that you're expected to do in the armed forces. You're just expected to say yes, turn to the right and fall out, and carry on and follow your orders. But it was a tremendous experience and allowed me to see part of the world that today I very much am able to benefit from as the Minister for the Middle East and Africa. Stephen, you mentioned envelopes. You must understand that any MP, when you mention envelopes and money, does shudder a little bit. So if you don't mind, I'm going to keep well away from any of those. But it's a real pleasure on behalf of Her Majesty's Government to say a few words to the Global Thinkers Forum and congratulate you. There's a bell going which thinks there's a division and I should run back to the House of Commons for a vote, but I hope that's not the case. It has been said in the Foreign and Commonwealth Office that diplomats sensibly think twice before saying something foolish. Politicians, however, don't think at all before saying something foolish, but think it's sensible. I hope I'm able to break that trend this evening by underlining some of the shared objectives that exist between Her Majesty's Government, the Foreign Office, and the amazing work that you do and you've seen in the video this evening. Because I think we both seek to be a positive influence on the world around us and to promote accountable leadership, and specifically the empowerment of women and youth development as well. Now, in the United Kingdom, England specifically, I suppose, we are proud of our 800 years of democracy going back to the Magna Carta and the start of tempering monarchs and the power that they actually had and giving more accountability. And 800 years later, we're still morphing our way and discovering democratic changes, but we use that experience to help other countries around the world develop their own democratic structures, human rights programs, appropriate rules of law, and of course engagement on women's rights and youth involvement as well. Today, the laws that we enjoy are intertwined with international laws as well, and this helps promote not just prosperity and peace in the United Kingdom, but elsewhere as well. And I recently read a book, which I'd recommend, by Henry Kissinger on world order. And he talks about Europe and the settling down of rules-based order. And after the 30 Years' War in the 1600s, which was the most bloodiest war that Europe ever experienced, the most horrible period of destruction. And it ended with the Treaty of Westphalia. And this treaty essentially sowed the seeds for peace in Europe, where states would honor borders and they would not interfere in other countries. They would respect other ideas and values, and indeed other religions as well. And they would actually then be encouraged to not only be peaceful with each other, but then to trade with each other, to become interdependent on each other. And in essence, this was the start of globalization. Now, although this was challenged, obviously, in World War I and World War II, the concept has actually served relatively well for over 400 years. The aftermath of World War II, we did see the necessity for the formation of international organizations to solve some of the challenges that we deal with. The Bretton Woods meetings led to the creation of the United Nations, the World Bank, the OECD, the IMF, and so on. Important to bring countries together to solve solutions for the benefit of all. And of course, advancing that, we also had the European Economic Community and the EU. And yes, I am going to come and mention that horrible word Brexit in a second. But that actually took us more towards centralization and ever further closer together in decision making. And over the last 30 years, we've also seen, coupled with that, peoples and places have undergone changes of unprecedented speed, thanks to technology, the movement, and social change as well. And this is all summarized as we do today. We call this globalization. Yet, I'm now worried, because I see the result of the election in the United States, which of course we respect. But how was that election won? I see the result of Brexit here as well. How was that election won? And then, most stunningly, is the referendum result in Italy, which had nothing to do with the European Union, and yet the consequences to the European Union. This was just housekeeping in Italy, and yet it was used to answer another question rather than one on the actual the ballot sheet itself. This is a backlash against globalization. So there are aspects of that globalization that we, collectively here, need to be concerned about. And the call for more isolationism, for looking after ourselves, is very, very worrying indeed. And for us global thinkers, we should be wary of the possible consequences. Voters across Europe have actually lost faith with the European Union in solving the Eurozone crisis, in solving the flowing of refugees that are coming into Eastern Europe, in solving a resurgent Russia, and of course, as well as the United Nations, unable to get a Security Council resolution through, unable to solve the Syria conflict, with Aleppo very sadly falling as we speak this evening. And the United States, it was the loss of faith in the establishment, failing to look after Middle America, as the big businesses actually have taken over and the elite have got richer. So I make it clear this evening that despite that Brexit vote, Britain continues to strive to remain and earn our place as a permanent member of the the United Nations Security Council. We have the means and we have the aspiration to play a positive role on the world stage. But we must ask what more we can do. All of us must ask what we can do to thwart the slide of isolationism and nationalism that is creeping and becoming ever so more popular. So in Britain, we will continue to play an important role in the G7, in NATO, in the United Nations, the G20, and indeed the Commonwealth. We are the only major country in the world, in fact, that continues our 0.7% commitment to international aid, as well as our 2% commitment to NATO. But this is not just about soft power, but it's also about the influence that we can build in getting people to understand each other and between countries as well, in promoting an exchange of ideas, of values, of expertise, and indeed culture, promoted across the world through organizations such as the British Council, the world's leading cultural relationships organization that reaches over 500 million people in over 115 countries. Or indeed the BBC World Service, the world's largest international broadcaster, now working in 28 languages, particularly an important forum when reaching out and engaging with younger people. So while Brexit does dominate the headlines and will invariably carve a new chapter for our relationship with Europe, it should not overshadow our commitment to work with our allies on the factory floor, in the diplomatic corridors, and on the battlefield as a force for good in helping shape the world for the better. We cannot stand back and allow these forces of isolationism to gather ever furthermore. My biggest fear is that if Western countries turn away from the responsibilities and interests and commitment beyond their borders, then this will actually allow the space for extremism to flourish. It will actually mean that those standards of governance in those areas will slide, and that will actually mean that we will see things like Boko Haram, Al-Shabaab, and of course Daesh and elsewhere take advantage of those places where there isn't governance on very vulnerable young people that are promised a fast track to paradise using language which simply isn't appropriate and taking a peaceful religion and using it to their benefit. That needs to be challenged. So this work cannot be done by the government alone. We need to work with organizations such as yourselves and those that are being recognized this evening. The Global Thinkers Forum, I think, plays such a powerful role, and you are to be congratulated for the work that you've done. Elizabeth, you have moved this organization in such an incredible force, this being the fourth of these events, and long may that continue. I just end by saying that I saw this film on a long-haul flight, Alice in Wonderland, and not one I expected to be quoting this evening, but there is a scene where Alice is walking along a road and comes to a fork in the road. And there's a Cheshire cat in the tree. And so she asks the cat, which way do I go? And the cat says, well, which way would you like to go? And she says, well, I don't know. And therefore, because it doesn't matter which road you take. Well, we need to choose that road. We need to make that very, very clear. Because there are people out there that want answers, they want direction, they want leadership, and they want clarity. We are very much at a juncture in globalization, and we need to work together to make that work. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been a real pleasure to be able to say a few words with you. And once again, congratulations, Elizabeth, to the work that you've done, and to all those who will be honored tonight with your awards. Thank you very much indeed.